Hey everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to make a vase with 2 pinch pots and a coil for the top part. So because we have done a couple demos on pinch pots in the past, I'm not going to show you how to make those today. I know Sarah did one in earlier posts, and I've done a couple in addition to, I think Courtney did one as well. So if you're curious how to do the actual pinching part, there are some demos that you can review in previous of our posts. So you're gonna start with 2 pinch pots. I like them a little bit more rounded because when I put them together, I want it to be sort of hourglass shape. So those are waiting, and I pinched these out a couple hours ago. So they're not leather hard yet, but they're approaching leather hard. So they're not really squishy, but they're flexible when I put light pressure on them. You'll probably want an X-Acto knife, a paddle of some sort, some slip that matches your clay body, in addition to extra clay. So the first thing that I'm going to do with these 2 pinch pots is I'm going to match their rims a little bit more. So I'm just cutting off this little extra part with my knife or X-Acto knife. You can use a fettling knife if you have that. I just don't have that on hand, so I'm using my scalpel to make a more flat edge. So I'm just taking off the parts that are inconsistent onto both of these. This one's pretty good, like it's about the same height, so I'm just going to leave that, kind of pinch this even, and then I'm going to slip and score both of the tops. So I'll just use my knife for this, but you can use a needle tool as well, and I'm just making my score lines across the edge. Make sure that your score lines are at least about 1 millimeter down. You don't want them to be super light to where they aren't going to do anything. Then from here, I'm going to take my slip, dab, dab, dab. I don't want to add a ton so it doesn't get soft and squishy, but I do want enough to where it will operate sort of like an adhesion. Just going back over my scored lines a little bit, just to freshen them up, give them a little life. And now I'm going to try my best to align them. And this is why it's nice to have them not quite leather hard, because I can kind of squish them to meet each other. And once both of their edges meet, I'm going to kind of squish down, like I'm holding pressure down, and then I'm moving to that edge. I like to give my attachments a good kind of wiggle, wiggle, wiggle until they stop wiggling. And I like to keep these from having any holes, so they're totally closed forms. At this time, they'll look kind of like a snowball feature. I like that because they're going to be more structurally sound while they're kind of in this soft-like state. So now that those are decently attached, I am going to add a coil on that seam. If it is a little bit like more lines than you want or doesn't quite fit right, you can take like the edge of your knife or like a paintbrush and just kind of like smooth those more together and kind of work that seam in. I'm not too worried about it, so I'm just gonna add a coil and go over those parts. So I'm taking just a little bit of clay, squishing it out, and I'm gonna roll a pretty thin coil. So I don't want to add a ton of extra clay to there because I like it kind of coming in and back out. And feel free to roll a long coil because we're going to be using more of this coil in a little bit. So whatever you have extra, just kind of lean it over to the side. So now that my coil goes all the way around, now I can really kind of use my fingers. I'm going to squish it in first. And that's why it's helpful to have that closed form because it will let you press it around. And now once it's kind of in, I'm going to take my thumb and I'm going to squish it down from one seam, you know, like halfway. I'm just kind of using my thumb to scoop it so that that clay is going to squish onto the bottom part of the form. And I'm going to do that same motion with the top part. So I find it a little easier. This is holdable in my hands and I can just kind of go the opposite way. Right now, your thumb, especially with this type of work, I always find it's easier to use your fingers as the tool. If you want to use a rib tool, that's fine, but it's likely going to cause more lines. So I'm just going to kind of keep smoothing this until that becomes one cohesive form. And if you're feeling really inspired by this, you could just kind of keep building them up, you know. You could make like 5 or 6 pinch pots and make like a super extravagant vase by doing this process over and over. So normally I would spend, you know, a little bit more time smoothing that out, but for now that's good. And I'm just gonna hit it a little bit with a paddle to just kind of smooth and flatten it out. I could really alter the shape this way if I want. I'm just doing light paddling to get some of those finger lines out. And this all just depends on aesthetic choices. You know, if you really like to have the fingerprints shown in there, like you don't even really need to paddle. But if you, you know, want to get that a little smoother, if you have any kind of areas that the clay looks like it's kind of misshapen, you can go with your paddle. So now I have my hollowed form and I'm going to build the vase top. So I'm just going to freeform this and I'm going to cut a circle at the very top and make sure that you kind of angle it so that doesn't fall right in. And it does not have to be beautiful. Because this clay is still pretty wet, we don't even need to add like a slip and score for this coil. It's just gonna mold. So I want this to have more of a bottle-like shape. So I'm gonna take that coil leftover that I had on my last piece and I'm getting my finger in there and I'm kind of scooping up and pinching to build up that bottle form. So it's kind of angling up as I go. Again, I would do that same kind of scooping down to get that coil really on there. And this project's fun because it is an organic shape. Like pinching really allows for that hand-built look and that organic form to kind of take its own direction from you. So now I have the start of that and I can decide how much I want to build this up. So, you know, I could just kind of leave it at that, use my scalpel to cut it off, or just kind of pinch it up and make it organic. Or I'm feeling like I want a little bit more drama in there, so I'm just gonna add one more coil and then call it. So I wanna be careful. If I add the coil on the outside, it's gonna start to flare up, and I wanna keep it relatively narrow. I like that look. So I'm adding it to just be a little bit inside, and I want it to meet the walls of the other existing start. And so to make sure that it keeps kind of going in as I'm pinching, I'm directing it in and rotating it. So I'm just going to kind of keep building that up. And smoothing it out. Really, the rest is just deciding when you want to stop. So you could keep adding and keep going. If you really want to spend a lot of time refining, I would, make your form. Don't worry too much about the little lumps and bumps, and then let it set up and come back with a rip tool. I like the look of this because I really like vases to kind of explore organic form because they're interacting with and hosting organic forms. So I'm just gonna attach this and call it a day. Just do a little bit of smoothing of my coils later, but I'm not gonna cut it down or like take a rib tool to it. I'm just gonna kind of pinch it out. And then I have my pinch pot coil built vase. I hope this is a fun and engaging project for you today. It's a great way to let loose and not have any expectations of refinement, because honestly, these type of things, in my opinion, always look better when they're not fussed with too much, because they hold that sort of gestural appeal. So I'm looking forward to future projects with you, and I hope that you're able to complete some of these on your own, and remember to share with us photos if you end up doing these projects.